trying to make mental health, healing services, and processes more available and equitable. On today's Intentional Clinician, I have with me Dr. Laurel Parnell, PhD. Dr. Laurel Parnell is a leading expert on the therapeutic tool eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is more widely known as EMDR therapy. While Dr. Parnell has trained thousands of clinicians in EMDR, both nationally and internationally, Dr. Parnell has also taught transpersonal psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco and was core faculty at John F. Kennedy University in the Graduate School for the Study of Human Consciousness. Currently, Dr. Parnell teaches EMDR through Alliant International University, Omega Institute, Esalen Institute, ID Institute in Kassel, Germany, and the New York Open Center. Dr. Parnell has written 6 books on EMDR and is one of the most respected leaders of EMDR trainings and EMDR workshops. Now, we are going to talk about a couple of her books and trainings, but especially her newest book, which is really written with the person in mind who may not be going to therapy and maybe just needs a bit more help. And we're also, of course, going to talk about EMDR therapy and her attachment-based EMDR trainings that are out here in the world, and so much more. And we're going to deconstruct the EMDR process and the therapy process in the United States. And I think you're going to like it. And there is some challenging material in here. Thank you so much, Dr. Laurel Parnell, for coming onto the podcast today.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And as people know, you've been involved as a therapist and an EMDR trainer for basically over 3 decades at this point.
Yes.
You have a lot of wisdom to bring and a lot of things to say. For people that are interested, this is a very exciting new book you have coming out, Releasing What Isn't Yours, Living from Your True Self Through Multidimensional Integrative Healing. Now, we're going to talk all about that and some of the concepts that led to you writing this book and sharing this knowledge to help people all over the world. But first, I do want to talk a little bit about EMDR because for some people, EMDR is still brand new. And I know for you, it is not brand new. And I know that you've not only taught it, but you've taken ideas from it, like in your book, Tapping In, and just given people resources to just be able to do stuff at home. And I know that you're very passionate about bringing healing outside of the therapy room for those who can't access it. Can you let us a little bit, just tell us a little bit about your history with EMDR and why you like the therapy?
Well, I was trained in EMDR back in 1991 by its founder, Francine Shapiro. And at that point, I was already practicing as a clinical psychologist for a number of years. And I'd been working always with clients who'd had really severe early childhood trauma. And what I found very quickly was that EMDR gave me a way to really help people in a way that I wasn't able to help them in the past. It's extremely powerful. At this point, it's one of the most well-researched trauma therapies there is. It's been around well over 30 years. It's so interesting to hear that people feel like it's new because it's really not. And so much of the research was done a long time ago because it was really good research. I was trained more psychodynamically. I speak Spanish. I've worked with Spanish-speaking populations. I came up in my early years always working with people from different cultures. And so I've always brought in this broader view of the need to adapt what we do according to the needs of the individual, be it their psychological, emotional needs or their cultural needs. I also work with children and families. So I came in with the EMDR. So let me say a little bit about EMDR. It's just kind of my quick description of So EMDR, we call it a trauma therapy. And what we do with EMDR is we create safety with the person we're seeing. What we do is we call it resourcing or resource tapping. I'll describe that in a minute. And then we light up the memory network where the trauma is stored. So let's say it's been a sexual assault. What picture represents the worst part of that, the emotions, the body sensations, and any of the negative beliefs that got locked in at the time of the trauma. So we light up the memory network where the trauma is stored. And then we add alternating bilateral stimulation. So in the early days of EMDR, it was all eye movements. And then we found that some people could not move their eyes back and forth. They had eye injuries or they had some kind of difficulty with it. And so we found that we could tap on their hands or their knees. And that also set off this very rapid processing effect. So you light up the memory network where the trauma is stored. You add bilateral stimulation, and it sets off a rapid processing effect. I call it mind-body free association. And so people have thoughts, feelings, body sensations, and it moves very rapidly. It's a little more complicated than that, but what happens is it moves to what we call an adaptive resolution. You move towards health and wholeness. We say that when a trauma occurs, it gets frozen in the nervous system with the thoughts, feelings, and body sensations that went in at the time, and our body's natural healing system is disrupted. So with the EMDR, what we do is we activate our body's natural healing system, and it allows that information that's been stuck and frozen to move out. So people naturally move towards health and wholeness. So in order to do EMDR, you got to be able to tolerate strong affect. You have to be stable enough to do it. You have to be willing to think and feel uncomfortable things. And but it's amazing when it works in the right hands. And this is where I teach advanced EMDR. I teach what I call attachment-focused EMDR because I specialize in teaching how to work with people with early childhood traumas. You need more tools than the basic EMDR. You need a lot more tools because you need to be able to help them regulate. You need to help them get out of stuck places. You need to know how to create a very safe therapeutic relationship. But anyway, that's the idea with EMDR. What I call resource tapping or resource installation is the pairing of positive resources. So you light up what you're wanting to cultivate more of, let's say calm and peace, by the use of imagery. And then we use a little bit of bilateral stimulation to link it in. So I say light it up and link it in. So it's very controlled. So let's say you think of a beautiful mountain lake that is calm and you can smell the way the air smells in the summertime and the breeze in the trees, and you feel the sense of peace in your body. And then we add a little bit of bilateral stimulation. We say 6 to 12, right, left, right, left. And it seems to link that resource into the nervous system more fully. So these are the two: resource tapping we do for stabilization, for strengthening the person before dropping them into the big trauma stuff, and EMDR to rapidly process these big traumas that are held in the nervous system. So these two go together. What I've done is I've advanced this by creating what I call attachment-focused EMDR, where we can use imagery and bilateral stimulation to repair developmental deficits, like somebody who never had a loving parent, they never had stability. We can use imagination by creating a new mother, for example, the one they wish they had, who's loving and stable and kind. And then through imagination and bilateral stimulation, begin to repair and fill that in. So, because some people who've had these really deficits, it's just the way it was. So they have these holes. And if you try to do EMDR with them, they can sink in the hole and then they don't get out. They just get worse and worse. What they need is the repair. So this is kind of the advancement that I've made with EMDR, and also really needing to adapt the protocols to each individual. So that's a thumbnail on EMDR. I love EMDR because I've been teaching it since 1995 and all over the world. I love it. I love working with different kinds of people, and then seeing the adaptations we need to make according to the populations we're working with.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that background, Dr. Laurel. And what I've learned from EMDR is that if you have the right practitioner who's willing to adapt the therapy to the client and not just use the protocol,
you're going to get a large result. If the client is bought in, if the client understands the EMDR and is willing to open up their self, because just like, I don't know, physical therapy, it hurts to have to open up these emotions and tolerate, like you said, the affect. And that's where the therapist comes in. And so just, people that have never heard of EMDR or are skeptical, finding an EMDR certified therapist or one who's been trained and is undergoing training is important, or find somebody you really feel comfortable with to do the work, because that relationship with the therapist and their training is huge. Huge for the importance of EMDR. And I say that people find it new because only recently have we had celebrities opening up and talking about it. So obviously Prince Harry wrote a lot about it. Meghan Markle wrote a lot about it. I believe it was I hope I'm not going to get emails, but I believe it was Courtney Cox who opened up about her EMDR therapy experience. Oh. And then this business man, I'm not really sure who he was, but it got posted in the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago.
He said, he interviewed me.
Oh, he did? That was you?
Yes.
Oh, what was his name? Sorry.
I can't remember either. Yeah, Wall Street Journal. No, he interviewed me for an hour, and I came out with 2 sentences in his article. But
he had had a very
powerful experience.
Michael Waldholz, Waldholz, in his mid-60s, having a nervous breakdown. He says the enigmatic therapy that saved my life, and I was so happy to see him. As we are needing male role models in this country, come out and tell the real story about how he went through the process, and he was on the brink of death. And I'm glad you were in the article. I did read the article, but 3 weeks ago when it came out, but I didn't digest that you were in there. But and that being said, it is so powerful, and that people are skeptical. But remember, and I tell people this, your EMDR therapist is also trained in talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and all the basics. So we can always go back to basics if you're nervous. But opening yourself up to this, for me and for many, has been a life-changing process. And what you said, rapid change, especially with people with long-term chronic trauma, it definitely takes longer. There's no getting around that. And that wouldn't matter what therapy you were in. But for folks who haven't had long-term chronic depression or stuff stemming from abuse or attachment, oftentimes it does work fast. And what I mean by fast is in a couple of months, of sessions, if you can go once a week, you can start feeling a lot better physically and mentally, emotionally as well. So thank you for that. And now, of course, we've advanced it. And so, I mean, it is incredible. I'm a consultant for EMDR, and I don't do the training, but every time I work with new trainees, this was said yesterday in the group, I can't believe how well it went. I just followed the protocol and I helped the client, and then they just kept saying, wow, I'm looking at this completely differently now. And oh my gosh, I'm feeling less distress. I can sleep better. And they were amazed that it was working, because it doesn't feel like what our culture emphasizes, which is control the narrative or control yourself. It is opening up to healing. So anyway, back to you on that.
Well, really, we're not supposed to talk about a cure, but for some people, they've been living with something for their whole life, and with the EMDR, it clears it out.
Yes.
So it's no longer there. And what I talk about, and this is coming back to my new book, you come to your true self. Yes. So it's who you really are inside. So if you clear the traumas out, you come to your essential self. There's a part of you that's never been touched by what's happened to you. And after doing deep EMDR work, people come to this part of themselves that they recognize. It's very common. And they go, these things that happened to me don't define me. And it's just obvious that they don't. And they feel free. And often there's a free flow of energy that runs through their whole nervous system They have a sense of flexibility and adaptability. And I think what's important to let people know is you don't forget what happened. You just don't feel like it's defining who you are. So the way I talk about it is I talk about psychological versus objective memory. Psychological memory feels self-referential. This happened to me. Objective memory is it happened. I'm part of a greater whole. There's a kind of dispassionate view to that. And EMDR takes people from self-referential, this happened to me, I'm the center of the story, to it happened. And it doesn't define me. And I think that is a typical way it goes. And then coming to the true self. And what you'll see is that somebody who's a singer starts singing, somebody who's a dancer starts to dance, whatever their natural inclinations are, their natural gifts are, they're able to express them because there's no more blocks to those things. And so there's a sense of inner alignment that happens. There's a whole area of transpersonal psychotherapy. And I wrote about this back in 1997. I wrote an article for the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology on EMDR and spiritual unfolding. And I was seeing so many of these experiences. There were spiritual experiences that were people were having as a result of EMDR. And one of the most common ones is that they would come to a sense of compassion for self and others, a natural uprising of compassion. And this kind of alignment with true self was also typical of what people would experience. So I just wanted to, come back to that.
Well, yes. And I want to move in that direction to talk about your new book and what you've been accessing to give to the public, which this book is just coming out very soon here in 2026, releasing what isn't yours. But I would say this in response to that. I have noticed the exact same thing with every client, not only the clients who have chronic, persistent deficits and traumas and adverse experiences from childhood and adulthood, but ones who are more of your, they kind of made it to their 30s semi-unscathed of horrible happenings. Then something bad happened, really bad adverse experience. They felt that it defined them. They were trapped by it. They felt helpless, all of the things. And the worst part about trauma, and we don't even if you don't have PTSD being the worst version of it, is that it feels like it's happening now, which then this happening in the past feels like it's happening now, which then inhibits your entire life, your ability to love, your ability to be creative, your ability to do what your calling is, your ability to parent, your ability to be present. And EMDR, I've seen it like with everyone, every client I've ever really had a relationship with where we've gone forward, something big changes or something small changes, but they are no longer identifying this adverse event in the same way. And when that comes, and this is the surprising thing, and I often get surprised. Sometimes somebody comes in and they've had such a rough time, and I'm doing, EMDR on some childhood stuff, which is just horrendous, and it's been stuck there for years. And they will say the most wise things I've ever heard when they get past that session. It is like they went to some sort of training to become a guru or a professor, and they'll just say these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never even thought of that. And then they start to be who they're supposed to be. And especially, I want to comment on the spiritual experiences. I have had people from all different backgrounds of faith, and obviously plenty of atheists and agnostics. Let's just go to the religious folks first. A lot of them felt that they did no longer believe in a spiritual guide after what happened to them, or a God, and they thought God was evil. After the EMDR, they have a renewed sense of spirituality. The agnostics often feel connected to other people and the world better. And the atheists, the same thing. They don't necessarily all of a sudden have a God experience, but they have a what I would call a spiritual experience where they feel connected and loving towards everything and everyone in their life. And that comes towards the end of the EMDR process. But it's quite incredible. And it's almost as if it rises from wherever it was trapped and comes out of the body to kind of above you. And I don't know how to explain that, but oftentimes when you're in EMDR, people feel nauseous in the tummy, and then later they feel stressed in the chest and the shoulders, and then oftentimes they'll start feeling it in their throat, and then often they'll say these things that they've never said. And it's the same thing. I've been doing it since 2009. What is that? 15? How many years is that? I can't even count. 17 years?
I wrote about this in my first book, Transforming Trauma, EMDR.
Yeah.
And Francine Shapiro tried to shut that book from coming out.
Why is that?
Because I wrote about the spiritual experiences people were
we didn't
having.
want it. And there's a large skepticism.
She thought it would
spiritual.
harm EMDR. But nobody ever even commented on it. But I wrote about these experiences you're describing then, back in 1997. And this is so common. And this is where what I really believe is our true self. We're naturally spiritual beings.
Yes.
And it's blocked by these experiences we've had that create constructs, the sense of this is who I am, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. All these beliefs get set in, but the beliefs aren't just cognitions. They're connected to body sensations and emotions.
And nervous.
So these constructs, these mind-body constructs, block us from living fully as who we are. And what EMDR does is it clears those out, so that we're connected to our true self, to our true life expression, to spirituality, to source, all of those things. And it's typical. It's people who have no connection to spirituality. Now, the other thing I will say that happens, and you may have seen this too, is they'll also have non-ordinary experiences. I've had many people have after-death communications with people they love who have passed away. They suddenly show up in the session, and they complete a communication. I also wrote about this in this new book. A man named Alan Botkin, he worked at the North Chicago VA. He documented thousands of these with the veterans who had non-responsive PTSD, and then he did EMDR with them, and it was because they had killed people in the war. Typically, it was the Vietnam War, and the people they'd killed would show up in their EMDR session, complete a communication. That would complete it with the person who had died, and it completed it with the veteran who then PTSD disappeared. But they really felt these were authentic communications with the person who had died. I've done so many of these now. I don't guide people to have these. They just happen. So I think another thing that's happening with EMDR is that it like in shamanic practices all over the world, indigenous practices all over the world use drumming and dancing to induce altered states of consciousness. And so with EMDR, we're using alternating bilateral stimulation. It can be tapping, it could be drumming, it can be auditory stimulation, but induces these altered states of communication that in some case create a crossing over the veil, if you want, so that there is this conduit to communication. So angelic beings will show up. Spirit animals will show up. Dead people who need to complete something will show up. So many of these things have happened, and I'm not directing them to them. They happen spontaneously. But this is where the multidimensional part, I think, is so important on the part of the therapist, that we allow the client to have their experience without interpreting it, and allowing them to make their own meaning. And we work with it this way. And then the other thing I will say is I use what we call the bridging technique. You probably call it load back. Same idea. You take a present day symptom and then you trace it back in time to see what it's connected to in the past. And then you reprocess the past, because that past thing is linked to the present. Well, sometimes that past thing goes to a past life. What the client feels is a past life. I don't judge whatever they're saying it is. We reprocess that thing, and it could be being burnt at the stake. It can be being stabbed through the chest with a stake. It could be so many things that are also connected to there's all connected to their symptoms. But as a result of doing that work, their symptoms go away. Right. I had a woman who, she had this fear of losing her children. And when we did the bridging technique, it went to an image of being in a cattle car, ending up in a concentration camp, her children being taken away from her. This is a non-Jewish woman, white woman. Children being taken away from her. We reprocessed that. That fear of losing your children went away. We did many of these that all went back to Holocaust concentration camp stuff, not related to her present life, but all of her symptoms resolved as a result of doing this work. So I'm not saying this is real, isn't real. It doesn't make any difference. This is where, when we open up our minds to other things that are possible, it allows our clients to talk about these things. And what I've become very aware of is how therapy has been colonized, and how our minds as psychotherapists have been colonized by Freud and by Europe. Where did the 50-minute hour come from? Where did this kind of neutral sitting there, not making any expressions on your face come from? That came from, Vienna. That was a really long time ago. Yeah. Those aren't the people I work with. And, this is the thing, working cross-culturally, you got to find a way to make a connection. If you're not making any facial expressions and not talking about finding a way to connect with a person and then not opening to these other dimensions of reality, you're shutting them down. And so people all over the world are open to these other dimensions. But what happens with therapists is they'll shut it right down because, that must be from your childhood, or that must be this or that. And then, or this must be crazy. You must be having, delusions or hallucinations. I'll give you a quick example of this. There was a man, I was providing consultation to a therapist who was providing therapy to a veteran who'd come back from, I think, Iraq. He was a psychiatrist, and he was having visual, quote unquote, hallucinations of a child. And this child kept trying to talk to him. So they were calling it a psychotic break. They were trying to drug him. And I said to the therapist, I said, let him complete the communication with the child. Ask the child what she's trying to tell him. Allow that communication to complete itself. Therapist did that. Communication was completed, and the child left. This guy was not psychotic.
No.
It was this other thing.
And this is the thing where the colonization. So I want to touch on three things that you said and see where that goes, and then talk about some of your techniques. So real quick, for everyone listening, as the therapist, what Dr. Parnell is saying, from what I understand, you tell me, is that the therapists, oftentimes we are going to school and we have a very Western, which is the United States coming from Europe, sense of science. And it's got to fit in that construct. And if it's not, we get scared of it, or we shut it down, and we don't, or we judge it, or we categorize it. And that is what we're not supposed to do. In fact, in the psychotherapy manuals, even the psychoanalytic, they were supposed to free associate and not judge it and let the client make the meaning. And what we found with the medicalization of therapy is that we have to make it fit in this book of disorders that was written by a bunch of white dudes in the 1950s, which is completely full of errors and hard to, hard to prove that these things exist. These are states of conditions that we see in symptoms that do exist, but they are states, meaning that people slide back and forth, left and right, more anxious, less anxious, more depressed, less depressed. We have propensities, we have symptoms. And while, yes, you can measure these things when you see people, they are not the full picture of a person. And we have to get out of the biased ways. Now, going back to the roots, and then I'm going to go back to the meaning and the colonization. I spent time in the Apache Reservation in Arizona. And what I learned there was that I don't want to say exactly, but it was every moon or new moon, they would have this big dance. And different people would participate depending on what was going on. And they would dance, and they would sometimes take different herbs and things, not psychedelic necessarily. And they would dance for 6, 7, 8 hours. On their left foot, they jump, and then their right foot, they jump. And then their left foot, they jump, and then their right foot, they jump. And then they do the arm movements to the right and the left. And I did witness some of this. They wouldn't let me go to the full ceremony, but I did see some of it. And I said, well, what is this doing? And, they have their spiritual beliefs, but they also said it's cleansing us. It's cleansing us from the bad energies, the bad things that have come in the last month. And we are getting it. I don't remember if he said shaking, but he kind of said we're shaking it off. Was the medicine man told me this. And I thought, my God, this is what EMDR is doing. And we have, thank goodness for Dr. Shapiro and you and everybody for getting it legitimized through the research to be able to do a toned down version, if you will, a sort of Western European, bilateral stimulation that is medically accepted, although certain psychiatrists don't like it, to release what is within. And of course, Dr. Peter Levine, of course, talks about the animals, how they shake it off after they the gazelle, when they almost get eaten by the tiger, they shake it off. My dog, when she's upset, she shakes it off. Humans don't shake it, we hold it. That's cultural. That is cultural. Not every culture has done that. And in fact, I would say that's a modern invention, is to keep it together, refine, stop the baby from crying. Don't, somebody loses their job, they walk them out. It's quiet. We don't scream and mourn like we did. That's a cultural thing. And people don't recognize that because you're born to this Western culture. Now, back to the meaning with the client. One of the biggest things I teach my therapists when I'm in the consulting room is they have a fear. The therapists have a fear that when they're using EMDR and they're using the tool, that the client may go astray and the client may go off on a bunny trail and they may not be able to heal the trauma. And I say, it's an intuitive thing, but you have to let the client go where it goes. And sometimes it's not going to make sense to you or the client why they thought of this memory or this part of the memory or something related that seems not related logically to, let's say, getting fired. They got fired and all of a sudden they're thinking of sixth grade. Why am I thinking of sixth grade? Well, what happened in sixth grade? Some theme happened in sixth grade. Maybe a teacher said something bad to you at parent-teacher conferences, or a bully beat you up and took your lunch or something. And that got stored as part of their identity or part of their worldview. And then that is now coming out. And when we say process, we mean a little bit like exposure therapy, exposing them, but we're bringing all of these other techniques with EMDR and the bilateral stimulation to let it flow, to let the body naturally heal. Our bodies want to heal and they want to stay alive. If you cut yourself, unless you have hemophilia, a scab will form. Thus, when we have emotional experiences, people are trying to cope in every way imaginable, but they don't always have the tools to heal, and EMDR heals. Now, go into your last thing. We have colonized it. We try to de-spiritualize therapy, right? We have tried to, because we want to approve who makes the rules. Who has made the rules in Western society since about the 1920s have been rich people and surgeons. Surgeons started Blue Cross Blue Shield. They used to be nonprofits, and they get paid the most, right? And when whoever gets paid the most often creates the rules, unfortunately. So we have to please them, and we've medicalized EMDR in a way, but we have to make sure we're not narrowing it. Trust the clients. What are they saying? And you even got into all this spiritual stuff where people have showed up. I've had this, they say, am I crazy? My grandfather showed up and said, it's okay to be you. I love you.
Right.
They go, what's that? I go, I don't know. I'm not here to tell you if that was your imagination having a closure with your grandfather, which is what the medical science world would say, or if that really was your grandfather's spirit coming to you and saying you're okay, or if it was some sort of manifestation of spirituality that I don't understand. The issue is the therapist must get out of the way of healing, but we also are the guide, right? So
we hold the space. We hold the space,
right,
and we help facilitate where they're going. And we also, I have to say, don't let them go too far afield.
Oh, yes, of course.
We don't. So we're holding a kind of therapeutic container, if you want, so they don't unravel, because some people can unravel.
Well, you got to be careful, right?
We're bringing them back. Let me come back to this whole idea of cleansing, because I think this is a big part of my book. I talk about energetic sovereignty and boundaries and things like this. And this is something that I think a lot of us became much more aware of, I think, during COVID times. So let me put it this way. We have our body minds, and everybody has a different sensitivity to, let's say, energies and impact of being around other people. And typically we can walk out the door, we can, move around. During COVID, we couldn't get around very well. We were, people who were stuck with their families in a small space. And some people really had a hard time with that. And therapists can start to feel, session after session, working virtually or whatever, can start to feel like they're taking on the symptoms of their clients. They can feel really burnt out. They can feel really exhausted. And we've been trained to think, oh, that's your countertransference, meaning this is something in me from my childhood that is getting activated by the client. Well, what I've come to understand is that we can be very permeable to other people's energies and experiences. And they can go into us and feel like they're us. We can have symptoms that aren't ours. Mm-hmm. We can feel really drained. And there are ways that we can manage our energy and cleanse. And I love this whole idea of cleanse. I spent some time in the Amazon, in the Andes and in the Amazon with shamans, mm-hmm. and in a process that I had a horrific thing happen in my own life with the murder of my son in April 2020. And I did everything I could to heal, including EMDR. And there was part of what was not changing was the sadness. I couldn't move it. And it was like, I couldn't feel happy anymore. I could see happy. I could remember happy. I could see other people happy, but it was like there was a wall. And so I thought in the past I'd spent time in the Peruvian Amazon, and not with shamans, but with nature itself. And I felt I need to get back to primordial nature. And that will help me feel that interconnectedness of all things that you feel when you're deeply immersed in nature. And so I found out I'd known about them for a long time, the Pachamama Alliance. And they have Pachamama journeys. They go into the Amazon. They go into the sacred headwaters of the Amazon. And you spend time there with Native people doing ceremony. I wasn't drawn at all to the plant medicine part of this. I never have been. I've been doing meditation practice almost all my life. I've been doing meditation, deep meditation and retreats. So I feel like I do my own journeys without medicine. So I've never been attracted to that, although ayahuasca was part of what we did there. But I was really seeking to connect to the nature itself. So even before going into the Amazon in the Andes, we did this cleansing ritual with a shaman woman. And it had to do with smoke. They use tobacco smoke. They use plants to brush you with. They use an egg. She ran an egg over us. So we did kind of cleansing ceremony with her. And then when we went into we flew in a little plane. Friggin' terrifying.
Yeah, I'm already scared thinking about that.
It was like they had duct tape on the windows, and they had to weigh all of us before we got on the plane. And they distributed the group of us by weight, literally. So, yeah. And then, anyway, that was the scariest part. I tapped.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I tapped through that one. Anyway, we landed in the middle of nowhere. I thought, where is the landing strip? There were all these trees, and then there it was. And then we were greeted by the Native people of that area. So their whole idea was to introduce people from outside to their culture as a way of saving the Amazon. They want people to know about them and what they're doing to bring interest and to protect them from the oil companies that want to come in and destroy everything, right? So they want that. So we did all this cleansing ritual, and we got there. They, smoked us. We had they snort tobacco juice. It's like a total head rush.
I've heard about
tobacco
that.
Juice. Have you ever done?
I've never done it. No, I've just heard about it.
Snort tobacco juice, smoke. They use tobacco smoke. Tobacco is really what they use rather than sage. I know Northern America, sage. They use tobacco. And they painted our faces, and then we got in the water. So all of that was cleansing us to take our stuff off before we went into their space. So they didn't want us bringing our energy into their space. And so these cleansing rituals are so important, but we don't even recognize how much we carry around from our environment. And so the big story is that one of the things they do there is they do dream work. And they every morning you tell your dreams, and then they do dream interpretation. This is all over that region in the Amazon. So I really feel, and this is important with EMDR too, how powerful dream work is. And to me, this also creates facility to be able to go into other realms of existence, this multidimensional work. When you're watching your dreams and you become conscious of your dreams, you develop a continuity of consciousness. So I remember my dreams almost every night. And so I have lucid dreaming where I'm aware of dreaming when I'm dreaming. And so that's really something they cultivate there. So when you develop that continuity of consciousness through waking and dreaming, you develop a facility for going to different dimensions. It's like, oh, now I'm in the dream world. I'm aware I'm in the dream world. Now, if you're doing journeying of one kind or another, you maintain awareness at the same time. With EMDR, I feel like we journey with our clients. We go out into all these different places with them, not directing them, but we can go with them because without controlling it, because I'm comfortable with these different places. So they do dream work. And there was a shaman there who was basically a bodhisattva being. He is one of the most loving, kind, wise, amazing people. His name is Minari. And I had no idea that he was kind of internationally known. He was
right.
I had no idea. But he took me aside and he did this healing for me. And he brushed me, he used smoke, he did chanting, and he lifted the cloud of sadness off of me.
Almost like a Reiki sort of thing, or energy? Or
I have no idea. I've never done Reiki, but I'll tell you, this was no. This was his tradition, and I'm sure he called in spirits from the spirit world too. I'm sure.
So it was just like his way of doing it. I was just thinking of Reiki because you said lifted off of you.
Well, it felt like he took the cloud, and it turned to rain, and then it rained, and it nourished the earth. That was the sense of what he did. And I felt different afterwards. It's like I still feel sad, but I can feel joy too. So I feel connected to life. I feel connected to joy. I can be playful. So many cultures around the world use cleansing ceremonies. They know this. They've used bilateral stimulation all over the planet after, they do drumming and dancing after battles in Native Americans, right?
Yeah.
First Nations people, same thing. Africa, same thing, drumming and dancing. It's all over the planet. They've known to do bilateral stimulation and other things for cleansing. Smoke. A lot of Native peoples First Nations and Native Americans use sage a lot for smudging, for cleansing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cleansing rituals. I'm in contact with, have a deep friendship with a Native American elder, and she talks about pre and post sessions. She smudges before, she smudges afterwards. She's very aware of not carrying the energies from one client to another.
So this energetic sovereignty is what you're writing about. So she's doing a ceremony or a ritual which is working to help her not have the energy from the session before into the next session for her client and for herself.
Exactly.
And we could go real quick, science brain for a second. She's doing a ritual for herself that makes herself feel better. Or what I'm hearing from you is we are going deeper than that. We're going to what we can't see. We're going to something that is an ancient tradition all over the world before colonization of integration with nature and the spirit world. And now, of course, there's new physicists who are saying in some interviews that we have multidimensional understanding, or multidimensional does exist. and it's difficult to measure, right? But they're confirming what a lot of spiritual teachers have said, is that it is there and things are interacting with us. We just don't have the perceptual power to register it in our current mindset. But what I'm hearing from you is these spiritual teachers are registering some of this.
Well, here's what's so it just makes me, it's so annoying and makes me angry that we call these like it's pagan or it's heretical. Right. That very strong religious view that came in and dominated the world, so much of the world, eliminated the possibility that these practices had any value. They were threatening. And so my background in terms of my genetics goes back to Northern Europe, as maybe yours does. But my people, before the Christians came in, was land-based. It was the same thing that I got from Inari. It was the same thing. The sense of interconnectedness of all life, the multidimensionality of it. And then you either converted or you were killed. And so people converted, and then they took that to other parts of the world and imposed it on people too. So people weren't allowed to even know what they knew to do. But what you see, and what was so powerful for me also in the Amazon, was that these traditions were unbroken. The practices they were doing had been unbroken for thousands of years. I don't even know how far back it goes. Our traditions coming from Europe got broken, back 2,000 years ago when colonization came in from Christianity came in, and it is basically you convert or we kill you. And so that it either went underground, but the practices were very much the same ones. And so when you see the universality of the practices around cleansing, the recognition of different spirits and energies, you go, okay, maybe there's something to this. This isn't just archetypal connections. There is something to something that is recognized all over the planet. And the similarities are so striking. When you see, in Europe they're doing this, and in the Amazon they're doing this, and it's very interesting. And now I think with the openness to working with psychedelics, I'm not an advocate for it, but I'm happy that there's an expansion of consciousness with this. There's a recognition of all of these, the multidimensionality of it. It's like, oh yes, here it is, and you don't need plant medicine or whatever you want to call it in order to access that. It's right here.
I love that. And if anyone, just for reference, wants to understand what you're talking about in terms of colonization, you can read The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, which, by the way, if you do, you should probably also go to therapy and watch some nice, cute movies, because it's devastating. These are actual journal entries from the colonizers that are quoted. They're not just somebody's history. It's the people that were doing it, and other accounts from natives of what happened. If you want to know more about what you're talking about in Europe, these so-called witch hunts were a way. The church in Europe was a political tool to control the masses, because as population grew, they needed to do that. But there's plenty of books talking about how spirituality changed and was homogenized and taken by the culture of power, whatever power culture at the time, and utilized against people, against self-expression. Pagan literally just means people of the country and people of the hills. And people in Europe, all over Europe, when we were slightly more tribal before Rome, they had their own traditions and sort of spiritual practices, and some people would say superstitions, or whatever you want to call it. And the larger powers didn't like that, because that gave them a sense of autonomy and purpose. And to conquer them, they eventually utilized Christianity. Under Constantine, Christianity went from being kind of a socialist group practice to a very structured religion with binary outcomes of bad. You're either bad or you're good, you're either evil or great, you're either going to hell or you're going to heaven. These sort of things were inserted years after Christianity was born. But if you look at the witch trials and these sort of things, if you really look at and you read at these books, like there's a history of magic, witchcraft, and the occult, I've read a lot of these stories, all it was people in power convincing the government, usually a priest or a landowner, that these people over here healing with herbs and doing these sort of things were a threat to the government or the threat to the ruling class or the threat to the aristocracy. And how did they do that? Well, they made up stories that they were witches and evil and witchcraft, and they were distorting people's, they were ruining the crops, they were going against the church, they were subverting power. And then they would just go after whoever was in the village who was a prominent healer or medicine woman or man, but oftentimes women, and they would burn them at the stake. These people were not the caricature of the witch. They were usually spiritual or native healers of that space. And they weren't doing it for profit. And they weren't doing it for control. And the powers that be, and if you look at the Inquisition and the way the Catholic Church killed thousands upon thousands of people, and it was a power game for control. And so when you look at these spiritual traditions that still exist in certain parts of the world, they're often underground. They don't have big money behind them, and they don't have research behind them. They have experience, practice, and wisdom. And I would say, I don't want to get EMDR in trouble, but it is the closest you're going to get in a medicalized Western, reimbursed by insurance way of some of our inherent human practices that have been passed down for thousands of years. It has reins on it. It has a protocol. It has research base, but it is somewhat inherited from these ancient practices to some extent.
Well, I think what Francine Shapiro stumbled into was something that was already happening all over the world.
Right.
This idea of bilateral stimulation. She just put it into a protocol and created a structure for it. But as you know, it's like all over the world, they're using drumming and dancing.
Right.
And in some places, they're even using eye movements. So this is something that's part of our human experience that people have known about for healing all over. And I'll say, babies, you rock the baby. You're using rhythm. You're using that.
Yes.
Walking, you feel stressed out. You go for a walk. You do feel something relieving. And nature is so important. We got to connect to nature because we get the energy from the trees. We get the energy from, the big sky. One of the things I love about Arizona is the big sky and the stars at night. It's like you really get that expanded view that opens you up inside. So there's a lot that has to do with energetic sovereignty that I talk about in my book. I talk about creating a grounding cord, an energy bubble.
These are all tools people can utilize at home. They don't have to be in the therapy office.
Exactly. So my book, The Releasing What Isn't Yours, here it is. I got the advanced copies of it. It was written for the general public about how to do some basic things, like how to control, creating an energy bubble, examining, is this mine or not mine? You just spent time with a family member and now you're feeling really kind of upset inside. You go, okay, what's going on? Why am I feeling this? And then checking up inside. Oh, this isn't my energy. I'm carrying somebody else's energy I picked up. Okay. And then just ask for it to be released or send it into the earth as compost or into light of some source. You can do this with or without bilateral stimulation. Noticing where your energy bubble is. Some people just overlap with other people all the time. And so they're overlapping with other people in order to feel empathy with them, but then they're taking in their energies.
Well, and just a simple way, if any of people out there, not therapists, have been around somebody in a really bad mood, who's in a continuously bad mood for a few hours, what happens to your mood? Often, you would get a little bit of it. You're infected slightly. And so when you say bubble, that you're trying to align, you're trying to talk to the person, and dang, it's just in basic sort of regular folk terms, you're dragging me down, right? Well, they are that energy unless you know how to set those boundaries. And so I love that you're doing this book. You're taking all of the wisdom you have from all these EMDR books and trainings you've done, and you're trying to put it into practices that your average person can read, and they don't have to be a psychologist, and they don't even have to be in therapy to utilize. So I love that because that is, in a way, decolonizing what we're doing. We're trying to spread healing around the world, and a book
Right.
is still something that people have to access. But
Right.
there are ways to do that. There are libraries free, right? Is there an audiobook coming out? I'm just curious.
There is it. Yep. I recorded the audiobook.
So
It's in
that
my
is
voice.
huge for people that have trouble reading. And I love that. So I really admire the work you're doing, and being brave enough to say, hey, EMDR is great and it's there, and now it's proliferating healing around the Western world. But, these practices are old, they're ancient, and, you're right. I think Francine did she said she stumbled upon it. It was an accident that she figured out that this worked to clear trauma. It was, but many discoveries have been accidents, and I love that it's here, and I love that you've expanded past it, and you are studying other cultures that are, the Western American culture is into marketing and money and power and control, and you're studying cultures that maybe value relationships and time and autonomy a little bit more than we do, right? And I think that's important for us.
A lot of what's happening now is, especially in the US, things feel very unstable and chaotic. Yes. And people are having trouble just settling into themselves. We get pulled into too much media, too much negativity. And one of my spiritual teachers, Jean Klein, would always say, see how it acts on you. Meaning, we have these body minds. If we pay attention, how is what you're doing acting on you? How is it acting on your mind and your body? And then we can check up inside and go, oh, okay, I think I picked up such and such, like going to a grocery store with too many people or going to a concert with too many people. Suddenly I'm feeling shaky or not good. Maybe you picked up stuff from too many people. Maybe you need to do a cleanse. Maybe you need to get out in nature and take a walk. Maybe you need a big sky to give a bigger perspective. I had a dream this morning of a huge night sky with diamond stars. And it really had a feeling of that numinous spirituality, of that enormity of the night sky, of a really dark sky with the diamond light from the stars. That kind of thing really opens you up to, okay, this small space with a lot of contaminants, I need to create something bigger that can help hold more of this. Or I need to get in water. Water is very cleansing. Almost traditions all over the world. Baptism had to do with cleansing, right? So you look at all over, they use water. Salt water in particular is very cleansing. For therapists or for others that are doing healing work, preparing yourself before you go into session and then cleansing afterwards, especially with difficult clients. Creating an energy bubble, releasing what isn't yours from your bubble to begin with, calling in resources that can be there to support you in the work you're going to do. It's really powerful. And one of my criticisms, I would say, of mindfulness is great, but it has this idea that you can just be with whatever. Well, I'll tell you, some people can't because the pain is too big.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I share the same criticism of mindfulness. I think it really works if you have a stable life with supportive lovers and friends. I am a huge fan of transcendental meditation, but I'm not a huge fan of how much money they charge for it. So I'll give you a hack. The hack is it's an active meditation. I'm a huge fan of active meditations because I find mindfulness for people with trauma is nearly impossible.
Well, because they can't be with it. They can't be with whatever it is.
And let's just say today's age, ADHD, anxiety, all of the internet, all of the stimulation, people have a really hard time being mindful. So going to nature and taking a mindful walk is a lot easier than sitting there and breathing. So active meditations, which do involve walking if you can, or getting outside. And then I would say transcendental meditation, all it is an active mantra, repeated. Why does it do that? It clears out your working memory, and if you do it long enough, 25 minutes, your thought patterns will stop. The grinding, the ruminating, will slow down and you will break into a place where you actually feel where mindfulness therapy is trying to get you. Mindfulness meditation is trying to get you to that kind of calm state. You can get there, but I think in today's world, the active meditations are going to be more useful for folks than just sitting there, because we do not live in a calm space. Well, unless you move out to the wilderness and disconnect all communication, then you might be better.
But I think getting out of nature, I think for me, I have to get out of nature regularly. Because that creates that sense of balance. I take in the energy of the natural world. I mean, walking barefoot in the grass, anything to really help connect. Next week, I'm going to be up in the Sierras, up in the mountains. And I'm like, I can't wait. I want to connect to the granite. I want to smell the pine trees. I want to see that clear water in the lakes up there. And the air is so clean and fresh. It restores me. So I feel restored when I get into nature.
Well, and that right there is our human heritage. And that is where we grew up, and that is where we learned to survive. And unfortunately, due to circumstances of many folks who are, raised in circumstances where they don't know any better about how to experience that, how to get out there. I mean, in cities or rural areas, not knowing how to experience it and take that in, or never having been shown it. I've met people in big cities that have never left, farther than 15, 20 miles outside of the city, or maybe once only. And the same with people growing up without education in a rural area. They don't see the ability to connect to those spaces, because the spaces have been said, those Bible verses, man is supposed to conquer the nature and subdue it, or whatever. Okay, well, that was probably important when there were saber-toothed tigers around, but we've gone a little too far now. So they don't see the nature as this ability to connect and to find that connection with the trees and the rivers. They see it as something to subjugate, and then therefore there's a disconnect. So I love that you're emphasizing that. And of course, there's the field of eco-psychotherapy, but I think these are simple things people can do. I love that you're putting out the book and all of these trainings. So for therapists out there, Dr. Laurel Parnell has plenty of things at the Parnell Institute to dig into, recorded and live trainings coming up. For the non-therapist crowd, definitely check out her books for sure, tapping in. And of course, the newest book that we've been talking about, say it again.
Releasing What Isn't Yours.
Releasing What Isn't Yours.
And then the subtitle is important. It's Living from Your True Self Through Multidimensional Integrative Healing.
I love that. And I really think, when people come into therapy, they may be wanting to fix a problem, but what do people really want? They want to be themselves. They want to feel whole. And regardless of all the symptoms and all the things we can say in the Western mind of what's going wrong, it does come down to that. So I want to, just because of time, I want to give you kind of the final word. So what I mean by that is anything you want to say to somebody out there. Maybe you imagine them right now listening to this recording, because this recording, I've had this podcast for 8 years, and all of those first recordings are still there. So I'm planning on maintaining this for 20, 30 years at least, if not longer. So you just say this to whoever's listening out there right now in your mind, that they need to hear something from you.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing that there are multidimensional, multiple dimensions of reality exist, and that we can access them, we can recognize them, and that we also have energies that impact us, and that we can control what we allow in and what we release, and that there are methods for healing that are very powerful. Some of them that are very old technologies, and this newer EMDR is very powerful, and that there are ways that you can heal that are beyond what you know of now. And I think also to remember our interconnectedness, the web of life that we are a part of. And that we're not these little individuals floating in space all by ourselves, that there's this web of life that we're a part of. We're part of nature, we're a part of all life, and it's that multidimensional web of life. So that's kind of that, that's what I see, is that this multidimensional web of life that we're all a part of, that each part affects everything.
I love that. And I think that deep wisdom is available if you don't give up at the small answers that groups or companies want to sell you. So keep searching.
It's like opening our minds. It's like our minds are opening. And I think, though the times are really difficult, often during the most difficult times, it's times when people's minds open and new things come.
You're right. Anytime something is being destroyed, something else is being born. So
I think so.
I appreciate the work you're doing, Dr. Parnell, and it's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. I think I could have talked to you for another couple hours, but I've got to get back to my healing work, and I know you've got plenty to do as well. So I love it, and I'm sure we'll meet again in probably one of your trainings I'll go to, something like that.
Okay, great. So nice to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician Podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or share the show with people you know. I would surely appreciate it. As some of you know, I am passionate about preventing future violence in the United States. I have started a nonprofit with colleagues called the National Violence Prevention Hotline, which is a 501c3 organization. We are endeavoring to gain funding and collaborators and volunteers so that we can start a 24/7 hotline and chat line to reach potential perpetrators before they may act violently. It is a bold effort to curb violence and save innocent lives by working to connect with potential offenders while they are in the planning stages of violence, help to de-escalate them, and provide resources so that they can get appropriate professional help. The National Violence Prevention Hotline is looking to open up a conversation about violence in society, the causes, and the solutions. You can learn more by visiting our website at violencepreventionhotline.org. You can get involved by writing your congressperson from our website, sharing it with your network, or even donating to the cause. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am a consultant and I can help provide 20 hours that you need to become EMDRIA certified. Just check out the show notes and send me a message and see if we're a good fit to work together. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians at Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids as part of the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. And if you are in the state of Michigan, you can also schedule a telehealth appointment. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and the experience in their respective fields, the information on this podcast should not be viewed or thought of as the definitive opinion on any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you're in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Crisis Line at 988. Support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org. That's www.bookshop.org. It donates a percentage of sales to local bookstores all across the United States, which I think gives character to our cities and a place to hang out and a place to explore. You can order from the comfort of your own home online while supporting businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not involved in your local counseling or therapist or social work organization, please get involved to at least pay dues so that we can have lobbyists help keep mental health care accessible at the government level, and also expanding into schools and other places that need it. And also, if you didn't know, counseling organizations and professional organizations are working to keep us from becoming gig workers for a lot of large corporations who are coming in and trying to buy up local counseling agencies or basically pay you what they pay for people to deliver food to your house. So, get involved. Until next time on The Intentional Clinician, I wish you all a safe and peaceful week.